reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Stetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 195, an international break edition, a flu game edition for your boy. I am going through it this week, battling COVID for the first time, but we are here. We're potting. We're giving you the content on an off week for Spurs, regardless. Got Caroline alongside. She is at CG Stefco. Caroline, what's going on?
I've been unpacking boxes all day, basically. So I'm glad to take a break and chat about Spurs instead.
And I'm glad that you were able to pull yourself away from that to do so as well. Todd is also along with us. He is at TC_Kasho. TC, what's up, my man?
Any day that you can brighten your buddy's evening who's going through the vid with a little pod action is a good day. So, dude, I'm sorry to hear that you're feeling under the weather. I hope it didn't make you as sick as that Newcastle outing did me. I wasn't on the pod last time, but I hope for a speedy recovery for you, brother.
Yeah, we're slowly but surely getting there. It's been a few days. I'm sure it'll be a few days more, but we'll get home. We'll get there eventually. It's just not going to be right now. But we're gonna bang a short little pod out here for you folks and move along. Want to let you guys know, like we did last week, we're delighted to be partnered up with Digital Spurs. Digital Spurs is artwork put to your favorite apparel, including t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, hats, so much more. Danny Garrison creates these pieces, which we love so much. I know Caroline's rocking her new corduroy hat from Digital Spurs today. Todd is rocking his Cootie Romero Rolls Royce shirt. Out and about. Absolutely. Go to digitalspurs.com, find your new favorite merch. Let them know we here at the Tottenham Depot sent you that way. We love Digital Spurs, so go give them some love at Digital Spurs.
Honestly, buddy, I can't say enough about the stuff that Danny does. And it's one of those things where the way that we got partnered up with this guy is because we just gosh darn kept buying all of his stuff. It's that awesome. So do yourself a favor, head over there, check it out. You will not be disappointed. Stuff in addition to Tottenham as well. Danny always does a great job with the designs.
No, it's true. We were all buying his stuff and we were like, hey Danny, we should link up and partner up. And that's kind of how this happened. So digitalspurs.com, find some merch for yourself and let them know we sent you that way. Guys, we've got a pretty short agenda this week. Like I said, it's an international break. And we said last week we were going to kind of push off some of the transfer talk and just kind of rounding up the summer window for this week, which we are going to do. Before we get into the transfer window, this week we did get a little bit more info on the Europa League. Obviously, the Europa League draw was last week. We got the 8-match league schedule, I guess you would call it. But this week we also got word of the squad, and the squad was released. And I guess there's really only one player to talk about that was left off that was a surprise, and that's Jed Spence. Jed Spence was left off of this year's Europa League squad, at least for these first 8 matches. It can be changed if Spurs advance into the knockout rounds, but 23 players will be on the squad for Spurs, and one of them will not be Jed Spence, ironically enough. Fraser Forster will be, which I think is something to talk about. But Caroline, what was your first reaction kind of to this news? For me, I feel like I've got a lot to say about it, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, first thought, I'm glad these games can't go to penalties because we don't want a Fraser Forster penalty shootout situation. But honestly, I think this probably tells us one of two things, which is either Austin and Whiteman are just not trusted at all, or that Jed Spence is going to be playing a bigger role in the actual league play. Hopefully, for his sake, it's the latter, because otherwise it does seem a little troubling that he was, left off the squad in favor of a third backup goalkeeper. So, yeah, I don't feel like this warrants quite the freak out that I've seen online in my, very little spare time today. I think it was a little overblown, but it's, we kind of were left in this situation where we didn't have much choice but to make a tough decision since we could only have the 23 player squad. So it is what it is, essentially.
TC, where are you at with this? Because I'm not on the freak out side of it, but I am a little perplexed why Spurs need to carry 4 goalkeepers for 8 matches versus having some cover at the fullback position on both the right and left side.
So, if I'm not mistaken, Whiteman and Austin count as the club-trained homegrown, right?
Yes, and those are the only 2.
Exactly, and I think that is the exact reason why, because without them, you would only have a 21-player squad, right? So,
well, no, you could have up to 25, and without them, you would, you already have to reduce it down to 23.
No. So what I'm saying is those are the only 2, right? So, like, if you pull them at that point in time, I don't necessarily see. First off, I don't think that checks contractual boxes. Secondarily, I think the Jed Spence thing is. We were in 4 competitions, and we're trying to succeed in 4 competitions. And I love the idea of having Jed as the Premier League rotational back, right? Whether it be a right back or a left back, because we don't really have true left back cover. Shout out to Ben Davies. But I think more importantly, I think he gets his minutes in the cup. It would not surprise me if Jed Spence from the jump is the starting right back in the League Cup. And so I think that if I'm looking at Ange going, okay, well, where can I get fresh legs? Well, I can get fresh legs out of Jed in the cup. I'm going to want to rotate Archie, who's the other rotational right back. I'm going to want to rotate him in 100 different positions. So, of course, I'm going to bring him along. And then if I get stuck, he can play right back, in the Europa League. No worries. And then that way, the following midweek game, which is going to be a League Cup game and eventually an FA Cup game, we'll get Jed in there and rotate. So everybody gets some rest. Everybody plays some. Bob's your uncle.
I think where I'm at is you're moving around a lot of different parts for backup. You mentioned Gray. I mean, Gray is your backup right back. He's also your backup in the number 6 role. He's also depth at center back. You've got Jed Spence, who's your depth at right back and left back.
I'm going to push back.
Okay.
And I'm going to say he's depth at center back and he's depth at right back. He's a rotational piece in that midfield with 6 other dudes. So, like, I'm not particularly stressed about him and the in the midfield play. Wherever Archie Gray is put on the pitch, he will be impactful. Will he be as impactful as a center back as he would be as a right back? Probably not. Would he be as impactful as a right back as he would be as a 6? I don't know. It depends on what the game is calling out for. Fortunately, we pay a guy a shit ton of money with an awesome beard and a great dad scowl to make those decisions for us. And I think he's going to do a heck of a job. So I'm not going to scrutinize this squad at all. Now, I could end up with egg on my face, if Pedro Porro goes down in the first Europa League game and we're like, well, what the fuck are we going to do now? But I don't. I mean, I think that's, if I'm looking at the squad, that's probably, and I have to make space for those 2 homegrown players. I think that's going to check the box for me.
I think my grander point is the Fraser Forster point, where I'm fine with him if he's the backup goalkeeper to Vicario in the league. That's fine. But is it necessary for him to be in the Europa League squad?
Now,
in my eyes, no.
Isn't he England club trained or UK club trained or whatever? So as they go into Europe, it like makes a difference on the roster. I'm asking that question.
To my understanding, to my understanding, the only quote unquote club trained players that matter for Europa are the other 2 backup goalkeepers, Whiteman and Austin. Basically, a swap of Forster and Spence is the same thing. They are both English players, but not club trained. So to me, they're, in terms of the numbers and what lists they go on, they are one and the same.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any rule. Maybe I missed something where you have to carry a certain number of goalkeepers into this thing, and I don't know why you would need 4, but that's the part that I'm confused about.
Yeah, I can't say that I fully understand that. But to be honest with you, didn't you say that like you can switch it out once you get to the knockout round? if I'm looking
You
at
can.
this, I'm going, well, I'm not guaranteed a knockout round into any competition. And so I need to plan my squad according to how many matches I'm going to play in the time that this squad is eligible, right? Or is required. So I
Yeah.
think that honestly, I think it boiled down to math.
It piggybacks really well into the conversation about the transfer window, just from a depth standpoint. And let's kind of shift there. The only news from the week that is of note is that Alfie Devine does go on loan to Westerlo. He joins Luka Vucevic. I can speak. I'm like I said, I'm going through it here.
It's not Vucevic.
And yes, it is. It's
You might have
Vucevic.
added a vowel there.
I'm telling you guys, it's blessings be to anyone who listens to me try to speak on this pod. Thank you guys for bearing with me. He moves on loan. That's the only kind of post English window move that we have thus far. We don't have a home for Sergio Reguilon as of yet, as of this recording. But from the window standpoint, I think the depth is perhaps our biggest question thus far, right, Todd?
No, I don't think so. I think our biggest question is whether or not we can stop Victor Osimhen from who signed with Galatasaray, and we have to play them in the freaking the group stages of the Europa League. From our depth standpoint, dude, it doesn't fucking matter who's on the team if we don't play Ange football. It doesn't matter. And so I don't really want to talk about squad depth in terms of what are we missing? What are we lacking? Because would we have wanted another striker? Sure. But I mean, is there room for it? Not really. Right. Would we wanted another right back? Sure. But who's going to come in and sit behind Pedro Porro and likely, Jed Spence? I don't know. And, you're looking around going, well, could you have gotten another center back? I mean, you could have, but is that going to block Vucevic's arrival? What about Ashley Phillips that you paid a bunch of money for? So it's like, just because we can look at a squad and say, this squad doesn't have all of the pieces that I want on it, doesn't mean that the window wasn't successful or that the pieces weren't moved in the proper way. I think timing, as always, as I always say, timing is everything. And I think that the timing of where these moves are coming in is very strategic. The fact that we needed a backup midfielder and all of a sudden Lucas Bergwall shows up, right? That was something we planned a little while ago. I think we're seeing the same thing, right? Like Vucevic showing up, Archie Gray showing up. You're like, oh, okay. Like, oh, what's the and I apologize, the young man from Korea that we just signed. Like, these are all seeds that have been planted along the way, and they're starting to come to bloom. And like I said, man, I think Ange knows what the hell he's doing. Yes, we're impatient. We can Baruch assault ourselves a little bit, and I want it now. But that's not how this shit works unless you're spending Man City money.
Caroline, what about you? What's your reaction to this window as a whole? I know we're not dishing out grades here or anything. I mean, you can't do that a week after a window closes. But do you feel comfortable with this team's depth heading over the next handful of months? Because I agree with everything Todd just said. There are pieces coming, down the line, but at the same time, I'm a little nervous if there's one or two key injuries to this team that it could really hurt things.
Yeah, I think there are some positions that are feeling a little more sparse than others. Like for me, probably the biggest concern is the number 6, because I'm not real thrilled with the two, main options that we have there to begin with. But that's kind of a me problem, I suppose. But I have to agree with Ange that it's not worth it in the short term to bring in players who are not going to be part of the project long term, because we've talked about this so much, like how hard it has been to move on some of the players who were signed under the past, 3 or 4 managers. And that really holds you back from being able to make the moves you do want to make. So I have to agree with him that it's not worth it to bring in, kind of a short-term, like center back solution, for example, when we've got some good talent who's coming up the pipeline. Or it could even be that they've got their eye on a bigger target who's not going to be available until January or the summer, next window. So I think we're going to be okay, like, especially with the striker position. That was really just a situation where we had a really very unfortunate, three-peat injury bug hit at the same time. And, we know that Solanke's not a long-term one. Richarlison is very injury prone, so that is what it is. But I think Lancashire is going to be able to get some minutes, pretty shortly as well. So definitely not concerned about the forward line at all. I think we've got really good depth across the forward line, and a lot of different variety of players. So I think as long as we can tap into that as our strength in the squad and, score the goals that we think we should be scoring, it's going to be all right.
TC, what's up with these injuries, man? I thought at the beginning of the season you told me that this injury problem was going to be going away, and all of a sudden we're 3 matches in. And
No. That's not what I said. I said that the injury recovery time is going to be lessened significantly because of addition by subtraction, and I still hold true. If that other asshat was in there, Richarlison would not see the pitch again. Just saying. I don't know. It's very unfortunate. I think the fact that Solanke gets injured and Lancashire in his first real extended time in the first team gets injured makes sense, right? These are, I don't want to say that Solanke's injury is an Ange injury, but the Lancashire injury, I believe, is a hammy, right? Some sort of muscle, that's an Ange injury, right? Not a lot of players have the work rate that is required of an Ange player, and that takes a little while to build up a resilience to.
No, it's true. Look, guys, when we look at this window, obviously, like I said, we're not going to sit here and dish out grades, but I do think that this is a positive window. Maybe the Spurs didn't bring in the volume of players, but I do think there's a quality of players that they brought in this window. And I think that when we start talking about Ange and this being his third window, when you look at the just the kind of revamping that he's done with this squad, obviously for me, the key, and you guys both alluded to it, the key for me is way more about the outgoings than the incomings. And Spurs were able to offload all but, and again, as of this recording, one of the players, and that player being Sergio Reguilon, that that they wanted to. And obviously the Reguilon move may still come. There are still opportunities elsewhere, Turkey, I think, being the main one, where he could still go. So we'll kind of see what comes of that. And but I think the outgoings for me were always going to be the most important part. We've talked for years on this pod, and I know a number of other Spurs pods have talked about the fact that this club had to start revamping by getting players out before it brings players in. And they've kind of brought some good players in, but now they're finally getting the players out that they've needed to. So I think that's, for me, when I reflect back on this window, and really the last 2 or 3 windows under Ange, that's going to be I think the key takeaway for me. Any last words on the window as a whole before we wrap this kind of conversation? Obviously we're going to continue to talk about this, as the season goes along, but to put a bow on the transfer window, Todd?
I think we're going to look back on this window and see it as one of the most successful that we've had in several years, a couple of years from now.
Yeah, and I think already with Lucas Bergvall, we're seeing the fruits of a past window. And I think we're going to see the same thing with some of the young players that we have, like we said, in that pipeline coming along. It's going to look a lot better in the future. Just got to have some patience.
I do want to push back. Technically, Lucas Bergvall was a signing from this window.
Well, yes and no.
But he joined in this window. But
he joined in this window. But the plan to bring him in was from.
Well, yes, it was laid in place, but he wasn't however old, so he couldn't officially sign that. Anyway, I'm just giving you a hard time.
That's fair.
We do have to talk some more injuries, unfortunately, but it's not on the men's side. It's shifting over to Spurs Women, and this is it's really just a heartbreaking one. Kit Graham has suffered yet another ACL injury, re-rupturing the same knee injury that she suffered less than 2 years ago. She's going to miss the season. This sucks. There's kind of no other way to put it. Injuries suck, but especially when you get a player that re-injures, the same injury coming about. It's heartbreaking. Caroline, what else can we say other than this blows? This is a real hit.
Yeah, for her on a personal level, it's a blow to re-injure the same knee when she worked so hard to get back. But from a squad aspect, I think, she's really been one of our more versatile players. And, for that reason, we're kind of losing, cover at multiple positions. And I feel bad because, that versatility, she had to really work for that. She had to adapt and kind of adjust to playing a new position last season to keep her place in the squad. And it's tough to know if she's going to ever play another game in a Spurs shirt, and that really hurts to say, but I don't know if it's going to be a bridge too far when she comes back, from this second ACL injury. But obviously, hoping that she has a really, it's not going to be an easy recovery, but as easy as it can be in the circumstances. And I think we're very unlikely to see her this season because it took her quite a while to get back from the last one, but we'll see.
Yeah, they say the second when you re-injure the same injury, whether it's an ACL or they talk about this a lot in baseball with Tommy John injuries, the elbow injury. When you suffer that same injury again, it's so much harder to come back from the same injury a second time. So we'll see. Best wishes to her in the recovery. And I mean, there's not much else to say other than it totally sucks. Other news from the Spurs women's camp this week. We talked last week about Celine Bizet and that deal going through to Manchester United. That's official. The smirk on your face tells me everything. I think for those not watching on the YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot, Caroline's trying to bite her tongue. Don't bite it off.
I'm still disgruntled. I'm very disgruntled about it. That's the situation.
There's no reason not to be. It sucks. And I think that, let me ask you this, Caroline, are you more disgruntled with the club or with the player in this scenario?
It's very hard to say because I think if I were to say the player, I'd be making a lot of conjecture about her own personal feelings, which is probably not fair to do. Much like we speculated a lot about how Grace Clinton actually felt about returning to United. We don't know. We think we know these players. We really don't. But I think from the club perspective, it was frustrating that we got into the situation where we didn't get a transfer fee for the amount she was actually valued, I believe, at this point in her career. At the same time, she was a free transfer to Spurs, so we still made a profit. So I guess you can look at it from that perspective. But we probably should not have let it get to a point where her contract was running out like this, and we didn't get what she was actually worth. So
to be clear, Daniel always looks at it from that perspective.
Well, but he would like to see more than £60,000 coming back for I mean, anyone would. That I think that's the grander point.
And it's a very valid point.
At the same time, though, I think the player that we brought in, for her position, Haley Razzo, is probably going to be more productive from a stats perspective. She's not a long-term solution because of her age. And that was kind of the big downside to Celine leaving, is that she was supposed to be part of that young core that Robert was building. But I think in the short term, we're definitely going to, see better production from that side of the pitch, because I think Razzo is much more consistent. And that just comes from her being a very experienced player, both at club level and internationally. So it's probably a net positive, but I think it's just kind of the, personal aspect of it as well. Like Celine was a fan favorite, so that's going to hurt for a while.
There is a new signing as well to discuss. It is Anna, and I think have we settled on Siki or is it Cheeky? We don't really know.
I keep hearing conflicting things, so I cannot tell you, but I will research and I will find out.
We're gonna get it right eventually. Has signed with Spurs from BK Häcken of Sweden, a Hungary international. She's a 24-year-old, a midfielder. Actually has experience playing under Robert Villaham back in 2022 when he was there. So a solid addition, we think. I mean, truthfully, we don't really know a whole lot, but a versatile midfielder, someone who likes to play from the left side, move the ball forward, not a defensive player by any stretch from everything we've read and listened to in her first interview with the club. So an important signing, especially in the wake of what we talked about with the Kit Graham injury and, just midfield depth for this club, because that's kind of a place where they're severely lacking right now.
Yeah, for sure. That was, I think, if we're going to talk about transfer windows as a whole, that was the big concern on the women's side, was just the midfield is lacking numbers at this point. So this is a big relief. The downside is we don't know a whole lot about her. Most of us, I would say. I've kind of heard mixed things from folks who do actually watch the Swedish league week in and week out. Like, some people are pretty high on her, some are not so much. But I did see that she had her best season actually when she was playing under Robert Villeham at Häcken. So that's encouraging. I know you said she's not really defensive, but I did see some good evidence of like her, hold up play, which could come in handy. And it looks like she's also not shy to shoot. Like, she's got a really powerful shot on her. She's also capable of scoring a free kick. So I think she's going to be an interesting addition. I don't know if she's going to be like starting right away. It's really hard to say. But it'll be interesting to see, because she is, a young player. So, with Celine going out, good to get someone else young coming in who can hopefully develop and, be here for a while.
Yeah, that'll be one to watch. I'm grateful for the depth, and obviously, we discussed last week, but the transfer window for the women's side still open until September 13th. So still a little less than a week to go until that window is shut, and then the club will play their first game a week later in the WSL season. Before we get out of here, guys, a little bit of kind of, I guess, tangential Spurs women news, in the news that former, I'm going to call her Spurs legend and U.S. women's national team legend, Alex Morgan, has announced that she is retiring. Her final match for her club is going to be played on Sunday. This is, I don't think, very surprising news. Alex Morgan has kind of been, in the latter stages of her career over the last few seasons. She did miss out on the Olympic team this year, but a really, really big deal for such a legendary player in the women's game to be stepping away. What's, Todd, let's start with you. I know she's been playing out in San Diego where you are. I know you've gone to see her.
Absolutely.
Like, what's the reaction to Alex Morgan retiring?
Not surprising. I mean, this was obviously the sunset journey of her career. When the Wave won the supporters
Shield.
T tray is what I was going with, because it's far more of that than a shield, if we're being honest. It was a big deal in San Diego. It was a big deal for her personally. But I honestly, truthfully, Andrew, believe that three things, always three. One, absolutely qualifies as a Spurs legend. Absolutely 100% qualifies. Two, I think that she's really, like, San Diego's her home. All of her friends and family are here. She's having another baby. Like, this is a perfect time to go. And the reason why is, number three, I think she was gutted by being left off the Olympic team. And I think that took the last little bit of competitive fire truly out of her. Because, I mean, the Wave have been pretty shit this year, to be honest. And she's been fighting injuries in a really bad way. So it was time. When it's time, Andrew.
Caroline?
Yeah, like Todd, I am a fellow Wave sufferer, and it's not been a pretty season. Like, no one can claim otherwise. And I think a big part of that is that Alex really was sort of the talisman for that team. And it's been pretty clear to even those of us who were huge fans of her, that this was getting close to the end. And, obviously with her pregnancy announcement, that kind of sped up her retirement. And I think even she was a little surprised by that. But it probably needed to happen. And seeing her not make the Olympic squad was really tough, but probably the right decision in the end. And I think she's someone who's really got a good perspective, and she understood that it was, for the best, and she's got to support, the U.S. national team, the wave, no matter what. But I agree, like she is a Spurs legend because not only did she put huge amounts of pressure on Daniel Levy and the rest of the club to actually treat the women's team with the respect and ambition they deserve. But also I think it's like from a fan perspective, she allowed us to really dream and be like, we can get the big players at this club. So definitely a Spurs legend and just a legend all around. I think so many people have talked about not just the impact she's had on the pitch, but off the pitch as well, with getting really important like labor protections in the league, player protections. I just have so much respect for her, and it was really tough to process this one. I'm not gonna lie. Like as soon as I saw the still shot of the video of like her living room or whatever it is, I was like, oh God, I know what this is.
Yep.
And I wasn't ready to watch, and it was very emotional, but
it was very raw.
It was raw. It was raw for all of us.
It was like a four and to talk kind of quite obviously off the cuff for about 4.5 minutes just to your phone and then just post it. It was a hell of a way to announce a retirement. And then as Todd alluded to slip in the announcement of baby number 2 on the way. So congrats to her. And I'm glad you bring up the point about Levy. There's some, I guess, scuttlebutt when she departed the club about the discrepancy over why Spurs women were not training at Hotspur Way where the men train. And I choose to believe that she had a massive hand in pushing the club to be better, to treat the women's team on a more equal footing. Whether or not it's true, I'm gonna believe it, and I'm gonna tell everyone that that's the case.
I think the way we found out was that Jess Fishlock, who folks may know is like, one of Wales's players, she's plays for the Reign as well. Like she came out publicly and mentioned this. So yeah, I definitely believe it's true. And, I think if we hadn't had that sort of change that she brought about, we wouldn't see players like Beth England or Haley Razzo joining the club. So
I think that's spot on.
And
here's the other thing too. I mean, look, we do an American-based podcast here, but we have listeners in England. We have listeners, plenty of them in Australia, especially since the dawn of Ange. We have listeners all around the world. And here's what many may not realize. Spurs as a brand grew a lot when Alex Morgan joined Spurs Women for those few months, because I'll be honest, there are way more U.S. women's national team fans in this country than there are U.S. men's national team fans. And Alex Morgan has been the face of the U.S. women's national team for so many damn years. And the fact that she was going to go join Spurs, and look, was it kind of just to rehab and work her way back after her first pregnancy? Yeah, that was part of it. But the fact that she was willing to go there and put the work in and do that job, it brought Spurs, it made more American Spurs fans, I think, in that moment. And I don't think many people will give her that recognition for that, but I think that's very true. It's very 100%. True. And and that's also part of what makes her a Spurs legend. People may not remember that she was a Spurs player for that brief time, but it happened, and it was a big deal.
The closest thing that I can liken it to on the men's side is Jurgen Klinsmann. And I think that it lines up perfectly. And realistically, people remember Jurgen Klinsmann way more for what he did in a Bayern shirt and in a Germany shirt, West Germany shirt, than what he did in the Spurs shirt, unless you're a Tottenham fan. And then, they remember it like Christmas, the day that Jurgen Klinsmann signed for Tottenham. And, it makes a massive difference. It's the same sort of thing. I remember when Alex Morgan signed for Spurs, and it was like, is that? Who's fucking around on the internet? That's
it was a big deal. It was a very big deal and remains one. And I think I cannot wait for the day when she is able to take both her kids to Spurs, to the Spurs Stadium, to see Spurs women play a match, and they will welcome her with open arms, as they should, because I think that would be really cool. And it would only further grow her legendary status. So cheers to Alex Morgan in retirement. Really happy for her, and just another one another one for the books. That's going to do it for this edition of the Tottenham Depot. I told you we would get you guys out of here pretty shortly. Before we go, a little bit of silliness for you, for the listener, for the viewer at home. Our boy Dakota is living his best West Coast life in these here United States, and taking a little road trip this weekend, and wanted to check in with the pod, and sent us this. Let's hear from Dakota.
Hey everybody, we're doing an international break correctly over here at the Tottenham Depot. Went to In-N-Out for the very first time today and wanted to leave a review. I'm going to give it a solid 7.8 out of 10. People complain about the fries all the time. I think they're very serviceable fries. What are they good at servicing? The onions and the sauce and the cheese that you put on it when you go animal style. It's the best way. Burger, almost perfect. I got it as it comes. Got the double. I don't like tomato. I still didn't like tomato on the burger at the end, but I really enjoyed my burger. So the closest one is an hour away from where I live currently. I'm not going to be making that drive, but when we pass one, I'm going to stop.
Shout out to Dakota getting his first In-N-Out experience. I did not know that he had never had In-N-Out before, but as a 30-something-year-old man, he has now experienced it, and that's his review. Todd?
You know, as somebody who has eaten at the first In-N-Out burger in the world, and has been going to In-N-Out as a staple burger place for the better part of a half century, I would say that not ordering the burger animal style and without the thing he didn't like was a fail on Dakota's part. And I think that if he were to do it again and not order tomato and get the burger animal style, that score would improve significantly. I will, however, state 100% the fries at In-N-Out are dog shit if you eat them anywhere after 3 minutes out of them coming into or out of the fryer and into your bag. Any longer
3
than
minutes.
Any longer than 3 minutes.
I wouldn't give him 90 seconds.
You know what? My man is smart. I'm just saying, it's a very short half-life on deliciousness in the In-N-Out fry world. Now, folks in Southern California, we're well versed in this. So to Dakota's point, the only thing the fries are actually good for is to be a bed for all of that carnage to your arteries. The animal style fries is indeed.
That was a really good review, though. Like, he's very good at that.
It was brisk too, which I appreciated,
Yeah.
because we could. I told him if he kept it brisk, we could fit it in on the pod, and sure enough, we did. This is not an ad or an endorsement of In-N-Out, but if they do want to pay us to go forward, we're listening. We'll say that right now.
No, I think we can do without that one.
Yeah. That's going to do it for this edition of the Tottenham Depot. Thank you so much for bearing with me and my voice this week. Be sure to check out our episodes on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. Leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice to help spread word about the show. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok at Tottenham Depot. Be sure to follow Todd at TC_Kasho. Follow Caroline at CG Stefka. You can follow me at A Stetka. And once again, follow us at Tottenham Depot. We will have a preview out for the North London Derby at midweek. Scott and Dakota will be coming at you for that. Yeah, that's what's next. Be prepared for that.
Well, for the record, fuck Arsenal.
Yes, for the record. And
Always.
The next pod will be coming up after that one. It's a big one, obviously. So we will talk to you then. Until then, this has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.